Okay, welcome to Nested Loops. We're picking up, was it 15? Is that what Don's picking up?
Yep.
And then 16 and 17, I think, with Sam. So I'll turn over to Don.
Okay. We're continuing the conversation about adapting interfaces to individuals with Chapter 15, Proactive Computing. In the future, I will talk to my computer. So a quick review of last time is that we mentioned that user interfaces are usually static and they appear the same for every user. But users are individuals who are special, not all the same. For years, though, companies have been keeping track of bits of information about users from where we browse and what our preferences are, what things we buy. So how could we use that information to dynamically adapt user interfaces to individual users was the question that was posed. So he begins this chapter by talking about Electro the robot. This is a picture of him. And so Electro was a robot created by Westinghouse, an American manufacturing company, for the 1939 New York World's Fair. He had a dog also, Sparko. You see Sparko in the picture. And so some of the things Electro did was he greeted attendees to the fair. He spoke funny lines. He had some sort of like an air system that allowed him to smoke cigarettes, which I guess people thought was funny, inflate balloons, and respond to voice commands. People in the 40s believed this was going to be the future of computers, that we would have conversations with human-like robots, and they would do things for us. But even today, the concept of seamless dialogue with robots still sounds like fantasy. And can't show a video on here, but go watch Rocky IV portrayal of robots if you want to laugh.
I don't remember that. Do you remember what that scene was about?
I went back and watched it.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
It is funny.
Yeah, I don't remember it. I remember, if he dies, he dies. In
Yeah, this is the one that says "Happy Birthday, Polly."
Mm.
It was a robot dog, right?
No, it was like a big tall robot carrying a birthday cake. Yeah. Anyway, the author mentioned it, so I went back and I completely blocked that scene out. So yeah. So what's voice control like today, aka 2015, when this book was written? He says Siri was actually one of the many flawed attempts for a conversational assistant. And I'm quoting him as saying, eventually the usage flatlined to reports of 85% of users completely ignoring Siri entirely. So saying Siri did not get much use at all. There's also a company, Nuance, which created the voice recognition software that powers Siri, Samsung S Voice, and other services. And they've made a lot of great strides in the field of voice recognition, but the user experience is still really awkward. You'll see a lot of things like, okay, Google, no, I actually meant no. A lot of, I guess it's just awkward to talk to a computer. So I did the same thing whenever I'm going to ask for directions. I suddenly blank out on what I'm doing. It's just awkward, and there's not much room for error.
Yeah.
So although voice input works on stage, in movies, and on television, a lot of these are very scripted performances. And in real life, those experiences fall short of expectations. Now, I'm noting that this was 2015 because there was no mention of Alexa, and I figured that anything talking about voice control would mention Alexa. I guess it came after, but of course now it's much bigger than he was saying in the book. Clearly people don't ignore those tools entirely. They're really hyped. So he did note that as technology improves, there could be a surge. And I guess it's improved some, but it's still not the conversational level that people expected, I guess.
Yeah. Well, if they're expecting a Star Trek computer, no.
Right.
But Alexa has come a long way. This is definitely pre-Alexa. My question is, do any of you, since we all have Macs, we have Siri on our Mac. Do any of you guys ever use Siri on the Mac?
No.
But what about you iPhone users? Do you guys?
I disabled Siri on my iPhone.
I know Scott, when he first got it, was using it for everything, including much too personal conversations with his wife. And I think it took him a while to realize, yes, God, I don't need to know these things. Um, but then he stopped using it. Okay, Google. I use Google some on my phone. I know. I would say Android Auto. I sometimes use. I have the long received Echo for the car, which I have yet to put in because I need to find my three plug adapter because my Bluetooth is also external. So I haven't tried it, but yeah. Alexa's pretty good when it works, and maddening. I want to know how many curse words Amazon has me yelling at Alexa because it's not hearing me. Right. All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the more recent changes in the last few years is things like contextual questions, where you would ask about something, and then without naming that thing again, you would ask a second question, and it would bring out more information. So I noticed this with Google Assistant that I think what you can do, for example, is like ask about a movie or a video, and then say play it, and it'll start playing it immediately without you ever mentioning that name a second time. It's just kind of interesting. Those kind of changes, I guess, make it feel more natural.
Yeah.
Even though it isn't.
Alexa would also ask like follow-up questions. Like if you asked what something means, then she would ask you if you want to, have more info about it. Like on top of the line that she already fed you.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. There's stuff. I have looked at app development for Alexa, and they do set these contexts. Like I don't know if you're playing the Alexa games, where you can pull in from this context, you can do command. So people are starting. I don't know if they've influenced by this talk, but people are debugging it as it comes to try to make it better. I think it improves. Though I also feel that Alexa's its recognition seems to get worse over time. Like when I first got it, it was magical, and like from upstairs, I could command the downstairs thing; it would understand me. And now I'll be in the same room and I have to say the same thing like 26 times to it. So, yeah, and I feel that way with I use a lot of that swipe keyboarding stuff. Years ago it was magical, and now I'm mad half the time.
I know that my Google Assistant stopped recognizing my voice when I said "Okay, Google," so I had to like reconfigure it, and I don't know if that's user error or something about the way it works. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so he asked, is there a better way? So what if we aimed for something other than voice input? What if instead of trying to build reactive conversations with computers, we instead aimed for proactive help with our unique individual needs? What if instead of single movements of input or moments of input, a service worked continuously to help us with our varying individual needs? What if we shifted from hello computer to thank you computer, and made systems that adapt to our special, this actually was exactly as he said in the book, to our special as a noun, instead of responding to our voice with cheeky dialogue. So that's kind of what the whole chapter was promising to be about, is things that are reactive. And I found that the topics we're going to cover next they're very specialized. So it's not like a computer is going to help you with everything, but maybe it helps you with one specific thing in a better way, such as the Nest thermostat. Nest was introduced in 2011, and it applies data science to your house's temperature, humidity, activity, and ambient light. Eventually, the entire experience adapted for you, and it set the temperature you wanted throughout the day without any further input from you required. It's essentially the machine learning thermostat. We all know about it by now, and many of us have it. The primary experience shifted from reactionary user interface to a proactive no UI solution. And I guess the interesting thing with Nest is that you could just tell it when it's wrong. You set the temperature to what you want. It starts to detect when you're there, when you're not, based on movement. And then it actually runs the compressor and fan if you're talking about like air conditioning. based on not just the interior temperature, but mine, I remember would also look at like what the temperature was outside. And I don't know, it's all applying machine learning to the data to try to keep you comfortable all the time. And so in this, I guess, like single example of controlling temperature based on data, it generally works. But there's not really any consequences if it goes outside of the boundaries. Whereas the second example, hospital notifications. So this is a pretty lengthy section about this, but basically in today's hospitals, there's a reliance on beeps and buzzes, this is according to the author at least, from instruments to alert when a patient needs urgent care. But other loud sounds could possibly cause those alerts to be missed. In 2011, there was a study by the Boston Globe about how poorly designed and programmed hospital machines may have led to 200 unnecessary deaths between 2005 and 2010. So we pose the question, how might the healthcare setting be adapted in a no UI way so that alarms aren't missed and patients in need of care get the care they deserve? So he's approaching the hospital notifications the same way as, I guess, the same proactive instead of reactive approach. So first, understand the role of each user. Patients just want to lay in hospital beds, and healthcare workers want to be able to care over multiple patients in an assigned area. So instead of requiring, for example, electrodes to be manually placed on the patient and there be user error involved, we should design sensors that sit underneath the bed and read heart rate, respiratory rate, and movement without touching the patient. So then finally, we can adapt to the individuals, and instead of generic alarms that go off for a variety of reasons, we can study the pattern of each unique patient, compare them to patient history, larger known patterns, and other informed data sets, and when an alarm occurs, alert not just any healthcare worker, but the one that's most able to help with that specific problem. And he gives an example of a commercial product called N3ST3DLOOPS, which is a contactless patient monitoring system used in some top-end hospitals. It measures heart rate, respiratory rate, and movement wirelessly. In tested environments, traditional monitoring systems can sometimes blast 120 alarms, whereas the N3ST3DLOOPS let off only 2 more targeted, more appropriate alarms. And some alarms were even issued hours before issues occurred. So the idea is to apply machine learning to people's vital stats. So I'm sure people have different opinions about this. I did look up this product. I don't know if there's any other products like it, but it's basically some sort of a box that sits under the mattress, and then based on movement only, it decides what data is heart rate, respiration rate, and movement. And it does more basic things well, I guess, like if somebody's getting up out of bed, you can obviously tell that. That's not too complicated. But I can tell you from my experience with wrist-based heart rate monitors that it can be very inaccurate at times. So I wonder how accurate this actually is.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking. Depends on the tech. I just can't imagine it's that good for an affordable price.
Yeah, I don't understand how the technology would work well, but apparently people are using it. I don't know if it's very widespread.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Sam, having worked in hospital, either finds this really, really bad or interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of put it short, like stuff like this will never take off because things like respiratory rate and heart rate, those are nice, but if someone is actually at risk of dying, those two things are not really the most focused on. And if they're at risk of dying, they probably can't get out of their bed. So I'm sure stuff like this is like nice, but I don't think we'll ever get away from actually touching the patient and having electrodes on the skin. Well, maybe in the far future, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, the sensor. I think the sensor tech is not there.
Right.
But like these ideas seem a little futuristic. I think they're good ideas because there's a lot of thought put to it. But it's just like, I think some of it is tech based. Like, can we do these things and make it affordable?
Right.
You know, and then before you're done. And then I think, like, to use his voice, it's like, Alexa's getting better. But apparently, at the time of writing, Siri was terrible, and no one apparently on this call even uses Siri. Um, so I think they have to come out. They'll be expensive, and they won't be very good. And the question is, will you continue to try to improve this not very good, expensive thing? You know, but I think it needs a couple iterations before it's usable.
Yeah. And I think that this example compared to the previous one of the Nest, the thing that stood out to me is that with machine learning, there's a lot of error, right? It's learning. So with temperature, it can make mistakes and learn from you correcting it. But if you're talking about a patient that's sick or someone that's receiving medical care, it can't really afford to, you know, learn the boundaries. It needs to learn very, very fast if it's learning. So the whole thing about adapting to unique patients, I don't even know if there would be time to do that in this setting.
Yeah.
Right. And then what's the penalty if it's wrong? One of the things where you add more complexity, maybe you shouldn't be dealing with this problem that way.
Mm-hmm. Well,
okay, so
I think the real issue that this addresses is the noise. We always just get too much input. Email, text, Nagios, alarm. You know what I'm saying? We just think if we could just know the important ones.
Right.
That's a thing in hospitals too. That's a huge issue, is alarm fatigue. There are so many alarms going off that people just ignore them. Like providers just ignore them.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the title here, instead of generic alarms.
Yeah, just
I was gonna say, like when I was in the hospital with Isaac after he had surgery, the issue was not that he was getting like the right care. The issue was that like the speed of care was like not quite there. So alarms are fine, but just like, you know, not even getting the right people. It's just like they need like a little bit of time to like get to you. Like, and if that could be improved, then that would be good.
Wow. You know, I had some terrible indigestion that was painful enough I thought it was a heart attack. And the time I sat in the ER waiting for, you know, they put me in the section where they think I might have a cardiac thing, but hours later someone gets to me and says, dude, I could have croaked. If I actually had the heart attack, you know? It's like, oh. And that was the fast service. So God forbid someone has something that he thinks is indigestion, but it's actually a heart attack. He's sitting there in the room for 10 hours and then dies.
Well, just one more section left. His third example was athlete health data. And it says that Kobe Bryant collapsed from an Achilles tendon rupture in April 2013 and was unsure if he'd ever play again. It ruined the Lakers' season and lost them a lot of money. So then the NBA announced in September of that year that they would install a camera system, SportView, in all 30 stadiums to automatically track players' movements. The new camera system improved the experience for fans by giving them more angles to watch from, gave more data to commentators for things like how many passes people made, how fast they moved, how far they ran. But it also helped avoid Kobe-like injuries by monitoring the player data and reporting it to the coaches. Toronto Raptors adapted their training programs to that data and became the least injured team in the 2013-2014 season. I think this is actually pretty neat. I don't know exactly how you would avoid someone getting an injury with this. I just like data like this. You know, I'm really big on Strava and Garmin and all this collecting of data from exercise.
I'm curious to what kind of data they get. So you have cameras. So how do you associate? Hey, like, doesn't someone have to look at this? Oh, look, Kobe's walking a little funny. Has he hurt his knee or something?
Yeah, and it's not. That's the thing, is it's not that fine of information. It's more like how many minutes did they spend on the court. Stuff you could really track already. Mm-hmm. A lot of it, but then because basically the complaint about Kobe was supposedly that he was one of the oldest players, and he had the second most minutes in game that season. even though he was one of the older players. So they were saying that it was the coaching staff's fault because he was being played too much. So number one is you immediately get that kind of data. You also get data on how far each player ran. So that's going to tell you maybe some things about overuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, there's also stats. Like it can tell when you're passing the ball. So you're gonna get that kind of information. I don't think it would tell you if something is wrong with someone. It's just more like a data point to go along with all the other training data.
Mm-hmm. It's another thing to see. Oh, okay. It would be useful if it could sit there and you get a game, a little spreadsheet comes out. Kobe, this, that, weird gait,
Well, when I was
favoring left arm.
When I was in school, I did the summer research program, and not me, but another team that was doing research. They were using the Xbox Kinect, which I'm sure you're familiar with how it tracks joint movements, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they were trying to develop was some sort of a protocol for stroke victims to do exercises in front of the Kinect, and it monitor them at home and how they're improving with range of motion and control and these different things. So if it was that level, if it could actually tell like joint movements of all the players and see when something's weird, or monitor their run, maybe see when they're limping, something like that. But again, that's something that someone sitting on the sidelines can probably, that they can see that even more. The coaches should be watching for that kind of thing anyway. So I don't know if there's any kind of visual feedback the coaches would already have.
I'm gonna have to look at the Sport VU thing.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it, but it seems interesting. But yeah,
it's been around since 2005. I'm curious, and then apparently you can get baseball. I'm just curious. It's interesting. I wonder if we can write our own apps for it.
Well, I'll wrap up here. Is the whole lesson from this chapter is to try to make technology more proactive instead of just reactive. I was kind of disappointed we didn't get into user interface stuff in this chapter, but maybe that's coming.
All right. Comments, questions? All right, we'll move on to Sam then.
All right. To answer your question quickly, the Xbox Kinect actually has like a really awesome development scene, and there are a ton of SDKs and stuff for Linux, and so you actually could write programs for it. Okay.
We got to figure out some way to apply that to our job.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I was thinking if you did it with football, like you could calculate like how hard people are hit by their speed and their weight. That would be kind of cool too. Okay, let me see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I see yours. Yep, I see me in your screen.
Cool. All right, so I did chapter 16 and 17. Chapter 16 was like one page, and it pretty much has no content. He just says that change is a good thing, and the fact that many designers may be resistant to these things means that they're challenging the norms, and that this conversation is good. So
yeah, when I look at the chapter, it's really more about him being thoughtful,
right,
beyond the scope. If you remember, like the first chapter, he said, "Look, we get I'm making up a number. There are 16 UI widgets that are in common use." And so the mistake we make is we take every problem and assign it to those 16 UI things. And so we got GUI, jobby, this button, this click, this screen. What do we got? We got, and he's like, when you look at these, well, what if we could think about this? So there's a lot of, for his conversation's a good thing. There's a lot of thinking about like, this is what people do, but is it any good? That was the thing, like with the car unlock app. People do this. But is it a good thing? No. The proximity sensor unlock door thing is a better thing. But that's not a GUI with screens. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we corner ourselves with the solution is because we kind of talked ourselves into it and never really spoke to anyone else. Because I do that all the time with programming, at least, where I'll come across a problem and get tunnel vision on like, well, this is how it's solved clearly, and then I'll talk to like literally one other person, and within 5 minutes they like come up with like this way more brilliant way to do it. So yeah, talk to people. Okay, so chapter 17 is all about privacy, and I guess this builds off of what Don's chapter was about. Is like, okay, we have all these cool applications that we can potentially leverage this new no UI paradigm. Like, how are we going to collect this data and have that also be consistent with the idea of user friendliness and the no UI? So basically, he goes on for a while about how privacy policies are kind of nightmares. There are thousands of pages that are completely indecipherable by the layperson, even if you're a smart person. Like, it's not meant for non-lawyers, right? And so you see common tactics like Latin phrases, really long and confusing sentences, caps lock for emphasis, and then you even get places like, I think it was Microsoft or something that had the helpful suggestion of like, you should read these. Like, all right, thank you. So someone actually did the math on like how frankly impossible this is, and in order for a normal person to read the privacy policy of sites that they commonly visit, it would take them 76 work days. Okay, so if you extrapolated that out to the general public of the United States, that's 53.8 billion hours of time. And so suppose we only got paid 25% of our salary, that's $781 billion in time. And he didn't have this in the book, but I calculated it. That's like 4% of GDP. So that is, needless to say, not going to happen. And in reality, people spend like 1.5 to 2 seconds reading it. So yeah, I think we can all agree that the modern day privacy policy is not useful. So the next question is asked was, like, do people even really care about privacy? And he asked this question, and the answer is yes. Like, people do really care about their privacy. 68% of users believe that the current laws are not good enough in protecting people's privacy online. And some people may say, well, what about younger generations? They post so much online. Like, do they care? And despite common misconception that young people, and he says specifically millennials, but millennials are like 30 now, so I don't know when this book was written. But despite the misconception that young people don't care about internet privacy, studies actually show that not only does privacy matter to them, but they're actually more likely to embrace the privacy tools. My mom is like 60 or something, and like she has this general concept of what privacy means, but she's not installing like HTTPS everywhere on her browser. Like she has no idea. And so the author speculates that this perception that teens don't really care is probably due to the fact that there are these outliers of people who are posting just an inordinate amount of data that floods the perception that outsiders have of looking into like this world of the teen internet with Snapchat and all of this. People just assume, oh, well, they post so much, like how could they care? But those people are actually probably in the minority, the people who post like an absurd amount of data. Okay, so how do we solve this? The old approaches to solving the UI nightmare, which is privacy policy, is like, okay, we could force users to scroll to the bottom. Okay, I don't know about you, but I just scroll straight to the bottom and click OK. They could use caps lock more, which is not effective. You could like have pop-ups and say, please read it. Like, are you sure that you do this, that you want to do this? And Facebook even tried this weird thing where they created a cartoon dinosaur mascot to guide you on your way through your privacy.
I kind of want to see that. I never saw that.
Yeah, I don't look it up. I'll look it up right now because I want to see it too. Let's see, Facebook privacy dinosaur.
It's like, I'm trying to think, have I even,
He's kind of cute, I guess. This guy's menacing.
I can see that leftmost screenshot is probably it in action.
Yeah, there you go. Really low resolution, but it says, hi Charlie, sorry to interrupt. You haven't changed who can see your post recently. Just want to make sure you're sharing this post to the right audience. And then it has options. And so that's an option, but like the dinosaur thing was like strange. It was just like, this thing is so impenetrable by the general public. What would make this less impenetrable? Well, what if we had this little cartoon mascot? That might help. Like, okay.
Clippy is a solution.
That too is like, all right, this is Clippy all over again. Poor Clippy. Okay, And then some people like basically admitted defeat, and they admitted defeat in so many words by including cash prizes as Easter eggs inside of the policies. Like, okay, well, we can give away $1,000, and we are so confident that we will never lose this $1,000 that we're just going to throw it in the policy, kind of de facto recognizing that no one ever reached the thing. So thankfully, a couple people got the cash because they read it. However, if they spent that time in a minimum wage job, they would probably make more than $1,000. Okay, so the solution is then we got to treat the privacy policy as an interface problem, and Microsoft, surprisingly, is kind of in a way doing it right here. They tried to solve this problem by including interactive UI elements so people can interactively control their privacy preferences. And so I don't know if you guys have ever installed Windows 10, but this is what it looks like when you install it. And you can turn on and off location, diagnostics, tailored experience, relevant ads, etc. And that's an interesting way to do it, because you're saying, okay, well, they're going to collect this, and if I disable it, like it implies that that's not going to happen anymore. Or you might get an exception, like, for example, you can turn off relevant ads, and it says the number of ads you see won't change. However, they may be less relevant to you. So yeah, you're still going to get ads, but at least you have this interactive thing to design your own privacy policy in a way. I did put this up here. This is a note from me, and I thought it was kind of interesting that Windows 10 is looked at as like doing this right. And in making the privacy policy more understandable to users, it becomes more clear how much Microsoft basically doesn't care about your privacy. Because when you make it easier to understand, people can actually see, oh, well, even though you want to turn diagnostics off, you're still going to send some basic stuff to Microsoft. Or even though you want to turn off relevant ads, you're still going to get ads and tailored and all this. And so in a way, the transparency that Microsoft has created has also afforded transparency towards the maybe not so desirable parts of their privacy policy that would otherwise be better being obfuscated in the big wall of text. Okay, so he proposes building on this idea. And so he asks, like, why do companies need data, right? And we all work on the internet, so we know why. Like, you want to increase stability with server logs, usage patterns, etc. Increase value to the end user, and that can be like either through stability or through features. And then, of course, you need to monetize in most cases, or else you won't have a company. But you can't take it too far. If you get too greedy, then users are going to bail on your service. If you actually try to be more transparent with how you're doing things, and it just exposes to the user that you do things really bad, the user is going to bail, right? And the one example is Jay-Z created this app where they like you download the app and you can listen to this album, right? And so the album's free, but you have to download this app to listen to it. And it turns out that this app, to listen to a single album, wanted access to your address book, call log, your social media, the ability to send messages on social media, email, and more. And Jay-Z, in response to this, bravely said on Twitter, "Sucks, must do better." Okay, so it was remorseful. Okay, so sucks, must do better. What do we do? What do we do in order to, tread this line? He argues that making the user comfortable is like the main goal here, right? You need to have a user that feels at ease when signing up for their software, and a way to do that is to be more transparent about how the application uses data, rather than in Jay-Z's example, right? They weren't forthcoming per se with how they were using stuff. I assume that the user figured out how they were using the data when they got all of the Android or the iOS prompts. All of a sudden, it might have been a better user experience if the app itself said, hey, we need this for this reason. I have several apps where they say, hey, we want you to enable notifications, and here's why. Or, hey, we need to use your dialer, here's why. And that is helpful to me. And here's some best practices for treating data, right? We need to start looking at data as something that the user owns. These are attributes of the user, right? We don't. If you were to have every single piece of data about that user, like down to the DNA, right? Everything you could know about this particular user, it still belongs to that user, whether it's DNA strands or where they went to eat the other day. Like that is data that they own, and we have to start treating it like that rather than treating data as something that the user produces. And he also argues that the app should destroy data after a period of time and or after the conversion life cycle has completed. So suppose this user is being targeted for, he uses cupcakes in the example, all right, well, we determined that this person likes cupcakes, let's market them cupcakes, right? Well, if they log off for 8 months, okay, unlikely that this data is going to be useful, knowing that this person uses cupcakes, if you're not being malicious and selling it to third parties. And so maybe just delete it, maybe respect the user in that way. Or if you're marketing to them that they may want to go and eat a cupcake, after you see them going to the cupcake shop, why do you need this data? I mean, is this going to be a weekly thing that you remind them that they want a cupcake? That's something that's frustrating to me about Amazon specifically, is that you can buy something that will last you 10 years. For example, I bought a toaster a while back, and toasters last forever. And I now get suggestions constantly for buy it again, buy another toaster. I just don't the purchase happened. We need to move on. Amazon.
Yeah. I hate that.
It's really obnoxious.
Well, it's just I bought it. Damn it! Stop showing it to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You already extracted my money. We no longer.
And once you
this.
get into the whole Facebook advertising everywhere thing, right? Every site is telling you to buy this thing that you already bought. Sometimes they're telling you to buy the exact same thing that you already bought.
Oh yeah.
It's I already bought it. Sell me something else. If you're
going
to sell me something,
and it also drives home the creepy factor of the fact that all of these seemingly third-party agents now have access to your data. They're technically third parties, but we're all kind of operating from the same data set when you think about it. All these guys are selling data to one another, so it's kind of creepy. So that also does not inspire confidence in the customer. Okay, so what can we do practically to help fix this at least somewhat? Part of the problem is that collecting data in general is problematic in certain sectors of people's lives, but take that for a given. What can we do to make it less creepy? Make sure that we give the users an option to be forgotten. He also suggests, which I think this is interesting, is add the ability for a user to destroy specific data. Okay, so with the cupcake example, you may say hey, we determined that you like cupcakes because you posted about this on Twitter, you posted the word cupcake, and you also searched about this on Amazon. Just letting you know transparently, this is how we're collecting this data. And you could say, okay, well, opt in or opt out of that specific type of data collection for that topic, cupcake. Now, it's not so creepy with cupcake, and so you may not care if people collect data about that, but what if you're on Amazon and you have to buy something that is, I don't know, relevant to a medical condition, or relevant to I don't know, just anything that is in someone's private realm. If you buy that on Amazon, it's going to taint your search history forever. It would be kind of nice to say, you know what, maybe don't track this one specific thing. Or YouTube videos, you click on the wrong YouTube video, now all of a sudden, your finely curated algorithm is completely destroyed, which is something that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Is now we all have to play this meta game of maintaining this dumb pet, which is the prediction algorithm of any given site. If you make the wrong step, then your algorithm is destroyed, and your user preferences are basically never the same, or your user suggestions rather. So maybe give users an option to delete specific pieces of data. The caveat to this is if you're telling users that you figured out that they like cupcakes because you're reading their Twitter and also because of their searches on Amazon, that may also be counterproductive because it lets users know how creepy data collection is, but that's another issue. And then the last one, and then this is the end of the talk, add the ability for a user to tell the app not to track the specific data in the future, so more of a prophylactic measure. But that was the end of the talk. He didn't really have any concrete holistic things to fix the whole issue. The whole issue is that people are getting away with doing creepy stuff by obfuscating it in these giant privacy policies. The downside is that even if you make it more transparent, it's just going to turn customers off more. And so, I'm not sure the end solution, but these are some things he suggests trying.
I think the key to a lot of his his suggestions in the second half of the book really are about collecting tons of data. I mean, basically invading your privacy to give you the convenience. That's kind of why we've all allowed the NSA into our living rooms via Alexa, because we can turn the lights on and off. Like, we're willing to give up privacy for convenience, or at least some of us are.
Yeah.
But to get that level of proactive, customized stuff, they got to collect a crap load of data.
Yeah, they got to collect it, and also they have to. Yeah, it's just hard because they have to collect it, but at the same time, like the user has pretty much no course of. They have no recourse. Like, how do you ensure that people don't do bad things with the data? Like, the collection of the data per se isn't bad, because people can opt out by not using it. But suppose they do opt in, like, how does the user get protected from just being abused by this company? And I think legislation is honestly the only way. Like, I don't think this is a problem that UI can solve. I mean,
Yeah. Well. Yeah. That's a tough thing. I mean, right now with the whole Facebook data selling crisis, is like they can say whatever they said, because I did not read the dinosaur thing. They ended up doing stuff. It's like, they can say what they're doing and actually do something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and at the end of the day, if it's not open source, then it's just a binary blob.
Yeah. So who knows? I think to make these kind of apps he's suggesting require a crap load of data. And let's say the company's legit, but they have that one disgruntled employee who takes it all and sells it anyways.
Right.
So
or just an honest mistake, and someone gets in and dumps the database. Like, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. All right, cool. Any other comments on this? So looking forward, it looks like, I want to say the next 18, 19, 20, 21, the rest are endnotes. They all look pretty short. I see 18 mentions Clippy, 19 short, 20. So I think someone can conclude them all, and then we can wrap up and talk about the next book, which some of you guys know I'm suggesting that Kathy Sierra book, which among other things will allow us to retain Alexis, which I like that idea too. So yeah, so I think one person could do all 4 chapters, because they only look like they're like a page or two. Kind of like.
I think that Brave is an interesting concept, where they're honest about how they're serving ads and how they're doing it. It's just, I think there has to be more transparency with these kind of apps that collect data. Let the user in since the beginning. You just say, hey, this is our business model. This is how we make money. Do you want to help us? We'll provide you the service.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Any other comments? Anyone want to volunteer for wrapping it up? All right. Well, I'll do it. I will read them in whatever fashion, and then we'll go on to our next book. Okay, thank you. Enjoy your day. Thank you for coming to Nested Loops. Go collect some data, and then don't sell it.